On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Pavel, it's great to have you here on the Life Science Success Podcast, and great to get to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing with Bridge Biotherapeutics and all the great work that you guys are doing.
Thanks a lot. I'm excited to tell you more about that.
Wonderful. So, may we just start with? Can you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I think probably like most of the people on your podcast, I'm also have a background in science. But I am very passionate about kind of connecting science to business together, which kind of what led me to go into business development where I am now. So our company, Bridge Biotherapeutics, is based in South Korea, which is where I'm currently living and working. So I've been there for over 11 years now. I started my career as a research scientist in the lab. And then eventually I started to move into more of the research planning roles, and then I worked at a biotech VC, and then eventually found my way here at Bridge.
And I mean, in terms of like a career and career migration, right? I mean, I just think about this journey that we all take, and it's interesting to me that somebody would go from the bench to business development. But what attracted you to this area of being near science, but also not being at the bench?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I already knew that my career was going to take me into this path, I think, before I even started grad school. I've always enjoyed learning about science a lot. So when I was a kid, I would always go to the library and take out all of the science books that were available, in math and physics, about dinosaurs, oceans, et cetera, et cetera. And when I did start graduate school, kind of we all have to work in a lab to get that hands-on experience. And while that was very interesting, I think I just wasn't patient enough, to be honest. Sometimes it could take a year or 2 years to get some type of really meaningful data, and then you have to publish it. And when you look back at kind of what has been done over all of those years, I felt that I could probably learn so much more without actually having to do these experiments myself. So that's why I kind of wanted to be in a position where I can learn a lot of science, but not having to do it myself. Yeah.
I think that's a critical thing, but I also think having people that have lived at the bench, as well as now are translating things is probably an important role as well.
Yeah. But I think also a lot of it has to do with just the person's personality, right? So some people, they really just love doing the experiments, and they really love kind of getting really into the intricate details of how to create a type of result that they're hoping to achieve and plan it all out and optimize it to kind of get it to go where they want it to go. And for other people, it's more about, I want to share ideas. I want to talk about the science. I want to talk about how we can kind of implement the science to kind of serve the masses in a sense, or that is what was a bit more interesting to me. And on the bench, we don't do very much of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I have to smile because as I started thinking about this podcast, one of the reasons why we're here, in the end, is because I could see there's a need in the industry to like tell the story. How do you tell the story of what's going on in the industry, not just at one company, but from a broader perspective? How do you tell what's happening, overall? And so, the storyteller side was more important, obviously from a podcasting side, and also having business development people like yourself that go, hey, look, here's how we should, maybe tie some things together to amplify what each other are doing, right? So
exactly, and I think you kind of touch on a very, very important point, especially when it comes to life science in general. So in life science, there's all these different people play a lot of different intricate parts, right? You have the people who are doing the discovery in the lab. You're having the people who are trying to find some kind of application for what they've discovered, and there's other people looking for grants and looking for IP issues and et cetera, et cetera. But all of it really comes down to communication at every single stage, right? Whether you're applying for a grant, it's going to be communication. Whether you're applying for a particular research position, it's communication. If you want to try to sell your invention or create a company and you're looking for investors, like you have a lot of CEOs on your podcast, right?
Right.
So they're very familiar with this. They founded a company, they just started, they want to get their idea out there and really excite other people about it, right? And hopefully get other people on board. But with people who have a very heavy science background, who've been there all their life, they may be lacking in some of these skills. And we see this this issue happen throughout all aspects of life sciences. And I think bio, where we are today, really kind of highlights this really well. If you look what's happening here, you can basically split all of these partnering meetings that are happening between kind of licensing in and licensing out, right? So you have one group of people telling potential partners, this is what we have and this is why we think it's going to be interesting to you, and then the other people who are listening about it and trying to make a decision if this should move on to the next stage of internal review, right? And if it's not communicated properly, if you cannot excite the other person about what you have,
right,
it's gone. That opportunity is gone, right? These people have like 40, 50 meetings in a day.
Right.
So what I've done in licensing also in my past, and I've been on that side listening to people pitch to me. Some I still remember were so good, right, that I wanted to invest my own money. It was so
wow.
good, you know what I mean? And then others, I was thinking, I don't even think you know what you're talking about, right? So, and that kind of gave a bad impression, not just of them, but of the company. And then I just didn't want to do anything anymore with them, right? So, I think that's kind of the crux of BD in life sciences, right? So to have that scientific background, to have the passion of business, and to want to communicate well with other people about what you're working in.
Yeah, so important. So let's talk a little bit about Bridge Biotherapeutics. What is it? What is the company, and what do they do?
Sure. So we are a kind of small, mid-size biotherapeutics company. We're founded in 2015, located in South Korea. We also have a research center located in Boston. They kind of run independently from the South Korean headquarters. They're focused on more discovery stage assets, primarily in oncology indications at the moment. For the South Korean headquarters, we have clinical stage assets, and we're more focused on kind of the development strategy for those assets, as well as kind of setting the whole organizational structure as a whole. Is kind of where we're focused for there. So the clinical stage assets that we have pretty much 2 in non-small cell lung cancer. So both of them one of them is going to start phase 1 very, very soon. So I'm just including it. The other one just wrapped up with the dose escalation studies. So it's going to be starting the dose exploratory cohort very, very soon. And then we have 2 other phase 2 assets, one in ulcerative colitis, and then the other one for IPF, right? So that's just the clinical asset summary, but there's also more in the preclinical stage and some other things like that.
Very good. Yeah. So I mean, all in all, though, you have a series of assets, as well, that develop your whole pipeline, not just the ones that are mature, but also the ones that are earlier stage as well.
Yeah. So I think the other kind of interesting point about Bridge specifically is when the company was founded, the type of business model that we implemented at that time, which I think is familiar in the US, is called the NRDO, No Research Development Only business model. In Korea, this was kind of unheard of at that time. It was very unusual for a biotech company to, have no lab and not doing any research and kind of outsourcing a lot of the experimental work. But when when you just start a company, you have to be very careful with how you utilize your expenses.
Sure.
And getting a place with lab space and hiring scientists and paying for all of these reagents and doing all these experiments is very costly.
Mm.
So our founder, James Lee, he's also kind of a BD specialist. He's been in BD for over 20 years himself. So he wanted to incorporate that business model into the company at that time. And he hired a very small group of people, maybe I think it was like 4 people, 5 people around that time. And each of them were also highly specialized in their own areas. There were scientists and uh, so what they did was he identified some very attractive assets to in-license, and then those small group of experts were able to kind of contribute their background and experience into directing how those preclinical programs should be developed, because it was getting outsourced. And with their efforts and their expertise, they were able to develop them far enough to bring them into the clinic. And those are the assets that I mentioned to you earlier that are in clinical stages now. That some of them are in phase 2. So we're no longer an NRDO now.
Sure.
But doing something different than what a lot of other companies tend to stick to, I think was a big factor in allowing us to grow as quickly as we have over the past 7 years.
Yeah, it's interesting because with COVID, I felt like there was this entire shift of of the way companies worked in the United States, the way that investors looked at companies,
Yeah.
and this idea of having the NRGO, kind of model was something that I think was important for some business leaders, and they were having trouble in a lot of cases trying to explain to people this company is not going to ever have all of these aspects
Right.
of the company. We're going to have the asset itself, and we're going to have a licensor for that. We are going to out license some other key aspects of the development of this drug,
Yeah.
and then sort of utilize that to our advantage overall. And I think it's a very smart way to, for a company to operate, especially.
I think so too. Yeah, really just maximizing the resources that you have.
Yeah.
And then when you can outsource certain components. And yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very good. And so at Bridge Bio, is there anything that you're announcing here at Bio 2023 while you're here?
Right. So last year, I gave one of the first company presentations here at Bio for kind of just an overview of our company or our clinical stage assets. I'm going to be doing that again this year. So it's an update to what I talked about last year, as well as I'm going to introduce a new acquisition that we did. So a couple months ago, we acquired a next generation biosensor detection company. And it's about 1,000 times more sensitive than the current commercial ECL biosensor device. So I'll be talking a little bit about that to kind of, give some excitement to the audience a little bit, and then they can reach out to me afterwards to learn a little bit more. But yeah, I think that's one of the main new things that I'll be talking about, in addition to updates.
Perfect. There's one other question that bio related that I wanted to ask you. So the theme of bio this year is that you should stand up for innovation. And
Right.
so how does your organization, sort of take that idea of, standing up or being aligned with innovation,
Yeah.
To the forefront?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So I think when it comes to innovation, it's all very relative, right? So from a perspective of a Korean biotech, as kind of I alluded to a little bit earlier, even in our early history, we kind of went on a path that most other Korean biotechs would not do. And we see that happen a lot in Asia, particularly, that usually not just people, but a lot of times corporate decisions, they try not to deviate too much from what is the typically kind of accepted formula or the way things happen to work. So we continue to do that to this day. And I think that recent acquisition news that I mentioned is a good example of that, right? So some people might think, oh, Bridge Bio has a whole bunch of therapeutic assets they're developing, and they have decided to also acquire a type of biosensor device company as well, right? I wonder how that kind of plays into the whole strategy, right? So that's something I'm more excited to explain during the partnering meetings and after the presentation as well. But I think we always try to follow the path where we see the most opportunity, right? And we don't really concern ourselves too much about how other people happen to be doing things, right? So we're very confident in our own ability. So yeah, I think we're one of the most innovative Korean biotech companies in the country. Truly.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. Well, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
So for me, I'm very inspired by people who have become masters in their respective fields. It doesn't have to be just scientists, right? It could be pro athletes, it could be chefs, it could be entertainers. Just all of these people, they share similar characteristics, that they're very dedicated, they're motivated, they're ambitious, and they don't give up. A lot of these people have failed many times, but they've stuck through it, and that is very inspiring, very inspiring. So I really enjoy speaking to people like that and kind of learning from them and hearing about their struggles, and hopefully improving my own life through them anecdotally. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've listened to very many episodes, you may have heard me say this before. I had somebody message me along the way and say that to be somebody in life science that is successful, you must be a god. Was the comment that the person had said, and I said, but if you actually listen to the podcast, many of the CEOs and other people that come on and are interviewed, they oftentimes talk about their failures. Yes, they highlight the successes. Of course, they do that. But they also talk about, look, these things did not work, and then it brought me to this point. And now all of a sudden, you could see how they sort of made their path. And that's not an easy thing to talk about, our failures. But at the same time, it's a good way for us to all learn, I feel like. And that's again one of the things that I feel like we try and talk a lot about, is that being successful in life sciences means that you have failed a lot.
Yes, of course.
And those failures now hopefully can cure cancer, or help somebody with irritable bowel, or other issues that may be going on out there. So it's very important.
Right. And and to add on to that point, while in the podcast setting, that's fantastic, because that can kind of open up the opportunity to discuss these things. Unfortunately, when it comes to publications, you're not going to see much of that, right?
Sure.
That's so upsetting, right? I think for many people in life sciences, these type of failures, they're not going to be able to get published in a nice journal, and all of these academics, they're kind of incentivized and kind of they have pressure to publish a lot, right? And you can only publish successful results. You can sometimes mention a little bit in the article itself,
Sure.
but sometimes you've had really important failures that didn't even let you make that final goal that you were trying to do. So you don't even have a publication in the first place.
Right.
So all of that, maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years of work that led to that failure that couldn't be published, is just, no one knows about it.
Right.
So someone's going to repeat that same mistake.
Again,
right? It's going to happen.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, I think, that's very, I don't know. It's very upsetting. I think that part of it, right?
Something we could all learn from, for sure.
Yeah.
What concerns you?
Well, I guess that, right?
Just the gap in research.
No,
it's a good one. Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about it. You mentioned it, and kind of led perfectly into that. That definitely concerns me. That's one of them. Another thing, I guess, that concerns me is there's a lot of unmet medical needs for particular indications that may not be that profitable.
Sure.
And because of that, there's not a lot of attention or resources spent on their development. And I see that kind of in areas of, um, you know, mental diseases, some certain psychiatric diseases, and some neurodegenerative diseases. These are very tough, very, very, very tough areas to develop drugs for. One of the reasons is there's just insufficient preclinical models to really be able to give solid data that can translate well into the patient. And there's a lot of interpatient variability, which can kind of fuzzy up some of the efficacy
Sure.
data that's there as well, and that kind of prevents it to going later on into clinical trials. So that's another thing that concerns me as well. But yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And then last question, what excites you?
So despite those concerns, I think some of the things that excite me may be able to address some of those concerns. And we're seeing it, especially this year with kind of the popularity of ChatGPT and a lot of AI related tools
Sure.
out there, is that I'm very excited to see what these new tools have in the context of drug discovery and drug development, right? Humans were very limited, right? Our mental capacity and just the resources that we have, data processing, and ability to analyze certain information. But now with the kind of strengthening of AI and deep learning, a lot of that legwork can kind of be done by AI, and then we can use it as a tool to help with our decision making. So I'm very excited about that, to see how that plays in that aspect of things. Same thing with gene editing and
Sure.
kind of new advancements in targeted therapy. So I think precision medicine is going to be a really big thing. Now that NGS and getting your genome sequenced is becoming so much more affordable, now you're going to see a lot of companies developing that kind of specialized precision medicine for each person, right? It's not going to be like a one size suit fits everyone. Everyone's going to have like a tailored type of treatment for them. So I think that's very exciting as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just a great, a great place, I believe, as well, for life sciences to head next, in terms of how do we leverage these tools to then better leverage the brain power and the time that we have. We're all limited on time. And so, with the time that we have, how can we best leverage all of these tools as well? So
exactly.
Well, Pavel, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really appreciate you being here and sharing with me all the things that are going on at Bridge Biotherapeutics. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.